Hey everyone, and welcome back to another DoorLoop webinar. Now I see some people have already started joining. So my name is Mohammed Abugosh, and I'm going to be the moderator for today. Now our host for today's session is Spencer McMillan. He's a very experienced real estate professional, and he also happens to be a DoorLoop user. And he's going to be teaching us about the long game in real estate and achieving financial independence with real estate investing. Now before we get into that, Spencer, we'd love to hear a little bit more about you and your real estate investment journey. So with that said, take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mo. I appreciate you having me on. A little bit about me. For the last 11 years, I've been working in manufacturing. So I started my career in sales and manufacturing, and I've slowly progressed in my career in manufacturing. But within the last 2 years, I've caught the real estate bug. So I've always been sort of fascinated by real estate. And so in the last 2 years, I got more serious about it. And I ended up purchasing my first two properties. These are retail office space buildings. And I purchased those in September of last year, 2022. So I still focus and spend a lot of my time in my W-2 manufacturing job, but I'm also sort of growing my real estate portfolio, and I'm also taking some steps to also work more in the real estate industry. And, that includes getting my real estate license and also working with a commercial real estate brokerage company in the Twin Cities, St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota. I do live in Minnesota. Our manufacturing business is in Woodville, Wisconsin. So I'm sort of back and forth in between St. Paul and a place called Woodville, Wisconsin. So I'm back and forth in between Minnesota and Wisconsin. So that's typically the area I'm focusing on when it comes to real estate investing. The two properties that I do own today are in western Wisconsin, and I'm also in the process of purchasing a third office building set to close at the end or beginning of January. So I'm a busy guy, but I'm growing in the real estate industry, and it's quite addicting. So I'm excited to be here with you today, Mo.
Awesome. We're so happy to have you here today. I think my first question would be, what is the long-term mindset in real estate investment, and why is it important?
Yeah, I mean, so much of the content I see on YouTube and on TikTok and these social media platforms, they talk about how they can, get rich in real estate in 1 year or 2 years, get some Airbnb or, do some house flips and make some quick money. But in my experience and my philosophy has always been, a slow and consistent and conservative approach to growing a real estate business or portfolio. If you take incremental steps and you're conservative in your approach, it's I don't want to say guaranteed, but it's a very high likelihood that you're going to be financially free in 20 years. So, if you have a system, and it doesn't have to be a complicated system, but if you apply it consistently in 15 to 20 years in active investing in real estate, you really can be financially free. I don't think that's the case necessarily with investing in the stock market or just stuffing away savings from your W-2. I think you've got to take savings from your W-2 and, figure out the best way to get returns from those savings. And in my opinion, that's investing in real estate.
Amazing. I mean, you've been doing it for 2 years now. You've got two properties already, coming up on a third. So I think you're on track with your plan there. It's amazing to hear.
Thank you. It's just the beginning, so it's
All right,
very small snowball, and it takes a while to grow it, but
yeah,
it's been fun so far.
patience. That's all it takes.
Well, I think my biggest point here is it's difficult to survive on real estate investing in terms of cash flow and covering your expenses. So, in my experience, you want to keep your W-2 job as long as you can. Um, I don't think it's not that easy to cover your expenses with just cash flow from real estate investments. So, my number one point is don't quit your day job, and you want to approach this from a long-term mindset. So keep working your W-2, slowly figure out how to save a certain amount from your W-2 income so that you can start building up a nest egg to start buying good real estate assets. I also think you need to never stop learning. If you can keep learning new skills, new information, keep developing yourself, that's going to be the best investment to get a return on. And if you do all these steps and you continue to save and buy real estate in 20 years, it's a very high likelihood that you're going to be very financially successful. So today I'd just like to go through, this is my approach to real estate. So this is what works for me. I think this is a formula and an approach that almost anybody can use to become financially independent in 20 years on a very conservative approach. So if you take this approach, you could probably achieve financial independence sooner than 20 years. But it's a very high likelihood that you're going to be very successful if you follow these steps. So again, do not quit your day job. Stay with your W-2 job as long as you can and make sure you're saving from that W-2 job. Number two, conservative underwriting. So once you have built up a savings, now you can buy a property. So when you're approaching your underwriting and penciling the numbers to buy a property, make sure you are conservative in your approach, factor in expense increases, factor in some surprises, and add some buffer to leave you room for surprises, because inevitably surprises come up. Number three, I don't think this gets enough attention. I think a lot of people say, hey, you don't need cash flow as long as the property is appreciating. You can sell it for more in a year or two. But if you're putting money into a building every month and you have negative cash flow, that's what can send you in a spiral downward. So in my mind and how I approach investing, I always have to have cash flow in my deals. Consistent monthly cash flow, even if it's a small amount, 100, 200, a couple $100 a month, you should be getting in cash flow. Otherwise, surprises come up and you've got to replace a boiler or a water heater and you're out $6,000 pretty quick. So in my mind, it's better to have cash flow deals. Then I'll talk a little bit about the benefits of real estate investing. So not only cash flow, but also debt pay down. The tenants are paying your mortgage. You've got appreciation, and then you refinance, which that's where the tax advantages are. If you can go 20 years and pay off a property, and then you get another loan on it, you can take all that money out tax-free. So those are huge, some of the the biggest benefits of real estate. So I really want to hammer on those and make sure everybody understands. And then I like to look at, how does that return in real estate compare to, say, putting that money in an S&P index, a low cost market index fund. You might get 7 to 10% a year, let's say 10% a year with dividends reinvested. If you compare that to the scenario we're going to run through, in my experience, the real estate returns have blown the S&P 500 returns out of the water. So I'm excited to walk through the examples, and this is purely a deal I made up. So, but I think the returns and the expectation of the outcome are consistent with the buildings that I own today. So I think it's a fair and reasonable deal that I've got drawn up here. And finally, you're financially free if you can rinse and repeat and do this consistently. If you're able to save enough money each year to buy another property, you keep repeating the recipe. So first, the accumulation of real estate using your W-2 savings. I think a lot of people, they don't look at their budget on a monthly or weekly basis. Typically, they are trying to pay their bills and they look at their bank account and, make adjustments as needed. But what has worked for me was, as soon as I got out of college, I created basically a balance sheet or a net worth spreadsheet. I might have had $5,000 in my bank account, and maybe I had, another $10,000 of stock savings. And every month, on the same day of every month, I would go in and I would update those things. And, I wasn't saving a ton at that time. I wasn't making a lot of money, but I made sure that I was increasing my net worth consistently, which meant I was building my savings up. And if you can make a game out of it and you're checking it consistently on a monthly basis, you start to think, how do I keep growing this? How do I grow it faster? So that's something that worked for me, to start accumulating my savings from my W-2 job, where even though I wasn't making a lot of money, I was still figuring out and balancing my budget. So I was saving consistently and building up my net worth so I could buy properties in the future.
Yeah, and I love that, looking at it like a game, because eventually you see it going up every month, but there's only so much you can save. Eventually you have to think of other ways to increase the income or find ways to save even more, or just, make more money overall.
Yeah. So I would save, but then instead of taking that savings and just putting it in a savings account that earned nothing, I would take those savings and I'd invest in a S&P 500 low-cost index fund. So I would just buy a Vanguard S&P 500 index fund. And fortunately, this was, right around 2012. So the market has done great from 2012 to now. So, it's not just about the savings, but you're getting the increases as the stock market has gone up too. And, once you decide, you've got to decide what your goal is. Do you want to buy a multifamily property? Do you want to buy a single family home? Do you want to buy an office building? You've got to set goals that are reasonable and that are achievable, but still maybe a stretch. So you want to push yourself, but make sure you define that goal. If you don't have the goal in mind, it's going to be hard to get there. Otherwise, you're just going to be drifting. So make sure you define your goal, outline the number that you want to save and get to so that you can buy the property, your first property that you really want to buy. So in this example that I'll go through, I'm assuming a single family home of $300,000. I thought that was a pretty close to maybe a median priced house, depending on what area you're in. I'm in the Midwest, so I'd say, a lot of houses are right around that $300,000 range. So if you're putting down 20%, you've got to save $60,000. So you can see I just built a small spreadsheet. This is in Excel. It probably took me 20 minutes to make this, maybe even less. But this is a simple Excel spreadsheet that anybody can make, where you put in the purchase price. You can build a formula out. You know exactly what you need to put down if you're putting 20% down. But there's a target to shoot for. So if you can save $60,000, you can buy a $300,000 house and start renting it out. There's also other options. If you're if you can get a FHA loan or various loan products where you don't have to put down as much money, that's great. Those are certainly options, but that's not the focus of this presentation here. So once you've got your 60,000, you've really got to hone in on your underwriting skills. You don't want to keep things so tight on your underwriting where there's no room for surprises or errors or things to go wrong. So when I'm underwriting a deal, I'll always make sure that I add a small percentage for surprises. I never assume that the seller's financials are accurate. So I always make sure I verify what the expenses are that they have listed. I also, follow up to see if there's any expenses that are not listed in their offering memorandums or their marketing material. And just be thorough about your due diligence. A lot of times taxes go up the next year or insurance rates are going to go up the next year. So you've got to make sure you understand, how much are their utilities this year, but then how much are they going to be next year? And you've got to build that into your projections, and make sure that you've got extra cash flow at the end of each month when you do it. So my point here is make sure you're conservative and you do your due diligence. It's not difficult, but it just does take some phone calls and a little bit of detail.
Has there ever been a time where you were looking at a deal and then that due diligence made you aware of some kind of issue or why it wouldn't make sense anymore?
Well, I've had deals where I look at it and the numbers say one thing, and then I look at it again a week later and all of a sudden the numbers have changed and the expenses are lower and the revenues are increased. So a lot of people, they say these are the potential gross rents. They're not actual gross rents. So they might be charging $1,000 a month right now, but they say, well, market rents are $1,300. So really you should be getting $1,300. But that doesn't mean that's what they're getting today. And so I try to buy as close to what is actual today, because if the landlord could get $1,300 today, why wouldn't they? You think they would go and increase the rents right away, and then they'd be able to sell the property at a higher price. So a lot of people, they leave out certain expenses. They might leave out management expenses. They might understate certain things or overstate other numbers. So I just always make sure I double check each one. And the more you do, the better sense you have for how much insurance should be, how much maintenance should be. And you start to get better at it the more deals you do. So I want to touch on cash flow here. So after you've done the underwriting, you've got your gross rents. You want to factor in, depending on the location, factor in some sort of vacancy. There's always going to be turnover if you have to renew somebody moves out, and you might have some paint or carpet change outs that you need to do. So you might lose out on some rent as you turn over tenants. So make sure you leave in some vacancy. I just threw these numbers in here to get sort of a rough total expense and something that I thought was reasonable for income from operations. And so here I've got a 6%, roughly 6% cash on cash return. If I'm going to get $4,471 of cash flow each year, and I put down $60,000. So I'm paying the $60,000 to get the house. That's going to then make me $4,471 a year. That's about a 6% cash on cash return. Right now, I'm trying to get deals with 10% cash on cash return. So I think these are fairly conservative numbers and very achievable. And you'll see the power of the other equity growth factors along the way here. So if you kept this house for 20 years, slowly your rents are going to go up and your expenses will go up, but not as much because your 20-year loan rate, that's fixed. So you're going to pay the same amount. Your expenses will go up maybe 2%, and your rents will go up maybe 3%, depending on where you are. So I brought this all the way out to 20 years, and your cash flow starts to increase immediately. And by the end of 20 years, you should get $266,000 roughly in cash flow. There might be surprises. A roof needs to be replaced, a boiler, whatever. Surprises come up. So, even if this is $200,000, it's still fairly good cash flow over 20 years. And now let's look at the other returns. So not only are you getting the cash flow, but you've also got your annual debt payment. And a portion of your debt payment to the lender, now you borrowed 80%, when you pay that annually, a portion of it is principal and a portion of it is interest. So according to this loan, which I believe is at maybe 6.5%, I did it at 7%. So at 7% a year, on $240,000, you're going to be paying off $5,700 in equity. Okay, so you get the cash flow for $4,400, you get the equity of $5,700 per year. So that's $10,000, a little bit more than $10,000 right there of gain. But every year in the loan, you're going to be paying off more equity and less interest. So over the life of the loan, it's a 20-year mortgage, so you're going to pay off the whole $240,000 in 20 years. So let's see, we're at cash flow. You will have gotten $266,000. Debt pay down, you're going to pay for the whole house if it's a 20-year mortgage, $240,000. But then there's also the appreciation of the property. So with inflation and as property values go up slowly over time, maybe you'll get a 2 to 3% appreciation per year. In some places, it might be 5%. In some places, it might be 1%. But I assumed a 3% appreciation rate per year. So you can see, So you can see after 1 year, 3% on 300,000, in 1 year, that's going to be 309,000. So you gain $9,000 of value in 1 year just holding on to the property. But the next year, it's going to be $9,200. because it's 3% on 309,000. So in 20 years, the property should be worth roughly 541,000. So you've gained 241,000 in equity just from appreciation. Okay. So now let's look at all those totals. Cash flow, you've gotten 266,000. Equity from debt payoff, you've paid off the whole property. So it's 240,000 of equity. And then equity from appreciation, 241,000. So in total, you've gained $748,000 on your $60,000 investment in 20 years. So your $60,000 is now worth $748,000. It's pretty incredible.
Incredible, yeah. I was going to say. And most people don't look at it like that.
Yeah.
But
I mean, this
you really
doesn't
have to sit
include, and
down,
then you'd,
go through all the numbers.
yeah, and you'd still get your $60,000 on top of this out of the building. So if you sold everything, you'd get 748,000 plus your 60,000 in your original investment. So you'd walk out of there with 800,000, roughly.
And then after the 20 years, are you still holding on to the property at that point? What would be the plan there?
Great question. So now it's time to refinance. So you own the whole property now. You don't have any debt on the property, and it's worth $541,000, like I showed before. So it was at 300 each year. It's increasing in value, 9,000, 10,000, 11,000, and now it's worth roughly 541,000. So then you go back to the bank and say, I'd like to refinance and get a loan. And you get the same 80% loan. So they're going to send you 80% of the property value, which would be $433,466. And you do not have to pay taxes on that. So you take that $433,000 and you buy another property. So it's a pretty incredible way to grow your wealth over the long term. And I think the biggest hurdle is the fear of getting into real estate, not knowing what to do and not knowing where to start. But if you can just get the courage to start and just do something, take the next smallest step to progress towards the goal, it's pretty incredible. So I encourage everybody to, save, build up the courage, and to take that leap of faith. I know you can do it. And that's how you become financially free in 20 years. So the deal summary, you cash flow $266,000. You received an additional $433,000 after refinancing. You can buy another property, and most of the cash that you receive from this is going to be tax-free. You'll be taxed on the cash flow, but when you refinance the cash out, it's not taxable. And in addition, there's also tax advantages by using depreciation that can offset taxes on your cash flow, depending on what the situation is. So that's for another video.
Right. Part two.
So I just said, well, how would I compare this to me putting $60,000 in my S&P 500 index fund? And I used a 10% return over 20 years. Your $60,000 would be worth $403,000. But your value after 20 years in the real estate deal, you'd be at $748,000. And also, I think there's a lot more tax advantages to that. So you're not being taxed on a lot of those dollars. So
Mm,
to me, the math was simple. It's to get better returns and to grow your wealth slowly over the long term. The best bet is real estate. Um, I think this is a very conservative deal, and the
right.
example that I came up with, and it's very achievable. But you've just got to take the step and be committed to it. So find a way to save,
Yeah.
find a way to use your W-2 job to build a small amount of money so that you can deploy it and put it into real estate. It'll be the best decision you've ever made.
Amazing. Um, yeah, I noticed as well. You decided to keep your day job as well. Why do you think that's so important? Maybe once you get a few properties, you can start living off of that. The cash flow that you're making on it. So, yeah, what's your logic behind that?
Yeah. My logic behind that is you've got to have additional capital to keep buying properties. And that's what really snowballs everything up. And it takes a little while to build that
Mm,
snowball and that momentum. But if I were to quit my day
right.
job today, maybe I only get, in this deal, you were getting $4,000 a year in cash flow. You can't live off $4,000 a year in cash flow. I mean, there's other people are paying down your loan, there's appreciation, but it's not cash that you can use. So for
Yeah.
me, you've got to keep the W-2 income coming in so that you can buy new deals. And, sometimes surprises pop up in real estate. So um, it's good to have that source of consistent income where if something does come up in the early stages of your real estate investing career, that you can support those surprises.
Right. Another question I had was about the 20-year mortgage. I know it's very popular to go for a 30-year mortgage. So, what makes you prefer the 20 years over that?
Yeah. Well, I use that because I am investing in retail properties, and these are commercial properties. So I'm getting what they call DSCR loans. It's not the
Mm,
same as a typical Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac conventional mortgage. It's a DSCR
yeah.
is debt service coverage ratio. So meaning the income of the property versus the debt you're paying on the loan, it's got to meet a certain ratio in order for the bank to lend on it. But that means that they're lending on the income generation of the property as opposed to my ability to repay the loan on an individual level. So typically
Right.
those loans are 20 years. They have 20-year schedules. Sometimes they're 25. So yeah, maybe I should have used a 15-year mortgage. Um,
Mm,
but for me, all my deals have been 20 years. So I think my next one is 25, the one I'm closing in January. But I would just
awesome.
encourage everybody to get started. That's the number one step. Find the money,
Mm,
save the money, uh, you know, a down payment so that you can take the step to become financially
yeah.
free.
Uh, do you think there's maybe if you knew what you knew now, you could have started sooner? Have you ever thought about that, or was this just the right time for you to get into
Yeah,
it?
great question. I actually started in about 2017. I started meeting with realtors. I
Mm,
started looking at properties, but I was so busy with my W-2 job that I just didn't have the time. So I
mm,
thought my best return on my time was going to be invested in my W-2 job, and it actually worked. I was promoted a number of times, and I was able to increase my salary. So,
Right.
now I'm to the point where I can generate a significant amount of extra savings so that I can buy more real estate. So, I think just at the time back in 2017, I was in a slightly different state, but now I'm in a place where I have the flexibility and financial resources where I can consistently buy properties. But it's taken a lot of work and a lot of savings, and you got to be focused on it on a consistent basis. And I like to make it into a game
Yeah.
because it's a little more exciting that way.
Let's see. I mean, you said back in 2017 you were getting advice from, people that you knew, peers, others that have been in the business. Um, did they also have a similar strategy that's sort of more long term, trying to buy multiple properties? Or did you know anyone that was doing more of a short term game where they're, renovating and flipping the houses? And did that ever appeal to you?
Um, I would say no, that never really appealed to me. I know it can
Hmm.
work, and I know people can generate significant returns, but for me, I always thought that would just be too time consuming. I do, I'm
Yeah.
working quite a few hours at my W-2 job still, and I don't have time to manage contractors, project manage a flip and construction, and that's not my expertise. My expertise is sort of
Yeah.
financial underwriting, make sure the deal looks sound, and I can consistently hold it for a long period of time. But so that's where my
Right.
focus has always been, more of a long term buy and hold
But
approach.
would you say it's riskier as well, taking the short term approach?
I would say yes, but maybe that's just because that's not my expertise. But for me, that's a
Yeah.
riskier approach. Um, I want to buy something that I know is
Yeah.
financially performing day one. Maybe those deals are harder to come by, but I don't have the expertise with construction, with contractors, managing that whole
Yep.
thing, and so that's too risky for
It's a
me.
whole nother world.
Yeah,
Yeah.
some people that's their expertise
Yeah.
and they can do that, but not me.
Awesome. And then I guess my last question would be, we talk about cash flow, but it's not always that easy to get it started. You need to find, a tenant that can pay. You need to manage the relationship with them and help them with any issues they have. So what was it like getting into that? Were there any challenges along the way?
Yeah, another great question. For me, I knew going into the property, and this is probably most properties, usually you're going to have to
Mm,
use or have some money available for renovations, repairs, sprucing things up a little bit. As people get to the end of their careers or they've had buildings for a long time, usually there's deferred maintenance. Um, things are cracked, things need paint touch-ups, things need fixing a little bit. So I go into my deals
right.
knowing that I'll need some extra money to, do minor repairs and fix things a little bit. So I
Like
think,
cosmetic changes.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
So you got to build that
Mm,
into your return calculator too, or your Excel spreadsheet. You've got to put in an extra
right.
couple percent or 5% to make sure that you're factoring
Mm.
in making some.
And then what about
God,
the people aspect of managing the tenants themselves?
uh, for me, that hasn't been too difficult. Um, these are more longer term tenants. So a lot of them, well, the two buildings I bought, they have long term tenants, but a lot of them didn't have written leases. So I thought that was a good
Mm,
opportunity because that means as soon as I buy the building, I can go in and um, adjust the rents to what market rents really should be. So it gave me the opportunity
Right.
to update rents within 2 months of buying the properties for most of the tenants. So that was a huge, huge way to increase the revenue very quickly, and make sure that I'm cash flow positive pretty much from day one.
Yeah.
And the tenants,
Damn, that was
95% of them
pretty
stayed.
lucky. Yeah.
So it worked well.
Yeah. I mean, they've probably been in the building for a long time, I'm
Yeah.
assuming. Yeah.
It's kind of a more
Awesome.
rural Wisconsin, and um, yeah, so not a ton of changeover. There's not a lot of office space available elsewhere, so it's a
Right.
good spot.
Awesome. I think we have one more slide here,
Great.
just some of your contact information if anyone has any questions. And that might be a good time to, give us your closing thoughts as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. I use DoorLoop for my property management, so I appreciate your guys' software. I appreciate your guys' customer service. That is one of the tools I do use to run my real estate investment portfolio. So thank you guys for having a great product and being great to work with. And if you do want to get in touch with me, the easiest way is to reach out to me on LinkedIn, just Spencer McMillan, and McMillan is McMillan. Feel free to message me if you want to talk real estate. I'm happy to share spreadsheets or review anybody's numbers. I want to be a resource for anybody looking to get into real estate. So please reach out.
Awesome. Well, Spencer, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was very insightful, especially how you were able to, show graphs, show real numbers, and really give everyone a better idea of what we're talking about. Because just giving the advice, general advice is good enough, but actually being able to see it with concrete examples is so helpful. And there's not enough of that information out there, I think.
Yeah.
So
Thank you,
amazing.
Mo. I appreciate you having me on.
Of course, anytime. We'd love to have you back soon. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Really hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, we hope you left them in the comments, and we'll go ahead and get back to you as soon as we can. Feel free to reach out to Spencer if you'd like to get in touch with him, and let us know if there's any other topics you'd like us to cover. Until then, we'll see you next time, and thanks for joining us.